Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. It is Danger and Titus again with another special around tabletop RPGs. How's your day, Titus? How are you today?
I had a
Especially now that
long
it's
I had a
Halloween.
long day. I didn't sleep
How
much.
long? Oof,
I've
I'm
been
sorry to
studying for
hear
my
that.
I've been studying for my MMORPG raids.
Ah,
If any of them are watching, I've been studying. If I make a mistake tonight, I'm gonna make a mistake tonight. I'm I'm just gonna apologize.
it's okay. We still love you, Titus.
I don't know if they will.
Anyway, before we start, it is Halloween month, so if you've noticed, a lot of our stuff is horror themed. We had Orktober yesterday, and the big army primer the week before that. And as we get closer and closer to Halloween, we're going to talk about more horror stuff. And of course, please don't forget to like and subscribe. The details are up there. You can see them: Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, our website, and our Instagram and Twitter.
Yes, please do not forget to like and subscribe. We will appreciate that very much.
And hello, Dandy. I'm glad to have you with us. Now we're going to go through and this episode 11. I noticed you might have noticed on the promos I put episode 12. I made a mistake. Sorry. This is episode 11, and we're going to talk about how to run a horror campaign well. But first,
Well,
yeah, well, as a GM, this is mostly for GMs, but there is a little bit in this for players too.
for sure.
And Titus, take us through the trigger warning, please.
Oh gosh, yes. Trigger warning. Since we're going to be talking about horror campaigns, we really have to bring up the fact that these campaigns are horror campaigns and they deal with things that are designed to make people feel uncomfortable. So we may have to talk about sometimes death, violence, gore, mental health issues, and many other dark themes. So, apologizing in advance, and you know what to expect. It's horror, guys.
Yeah, it's horror. Hi, Michael. By the way, so we're going to go to part one, being on the same page. We already outlined this advice in how to start D&D, and we feel like, especially in a horror campaign, we have to reiterate it, specifically because wait, sorry, specifically because the players and the GM, whatever system it may be, it's just better if they're all on this. If you're all on the same page, you know what things you want to see, what things you don't want to see, and it's a little bit more complex with a horror campaign, but it ensures that the experience is cathartic.
That's a very
And
important word, and we will be using it a lot.
yeah, cathartic. We need to cathart. We need to cathart.
All right. So,
Another thing you have to include in this discussion, I think, is a discussion on tropes. Uh, you have to. Do you want it to be, for example, a zombie campaign or a haunted house campaign? Do you want to Scooby Doo this shit?
yeah,
That's fine.
you need to be on the same page on what you're going to try. You never know what someone's okay with or not okay with. And I think one of the most important things in doing a horror campaign is when you're being on the same page, that includes everyone understanding that in this particular campaign, usually, almost every time, the reality of character death is a looming theme. Your characters will die, and if they don't, well, that's a
Well,
pleasant
lucky them.
surprise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pleasant surprise. Another concern I think here is wait, let me open my notes. I accidentally exited them. There you go. Your characters have to be designed to thrive in the horror genre. and it just helps you immerse in the game more. And this is advice for players. Okay, so we go to part 2, creating the atmosphere. Now,
Atmosphere is
this
very
is,
important.
yeah, it's very important. Like one of the most, if you're playing together, you can turn off the lights a little bit, turn them down, like I did, or turn on your sex lights, like Titus did.
They're not sex lights. Uh, um, they're not sex lights. This is just light that I
Okay,
have in my room.
okay, Titus. Your room looks like a sogo for no reason, Titus. Okay.
It's not a sex light. Another thing. With music and lighting, you can be
Oh
as
yeah,
creative as you want
exactly.
for something like this. Um, there are some systems, we won't talk about that in this episode, but there are some systems where the lighting is an element of the actual game. And there are some campaigns or systems where their characters have the lights on pitch black and everyone only has a single flashlight. Really, just stuff that makes everything more fun. Remember,
And
the point of a
y-
horror campaign is fun
yeah, fun through fear and anxiety and panic and sheer terror, and yeah, and
because that
the
can be fun.
nightmare. Yeah, because that can be fun. It can be cathartic, and in this episode, we're actually going to explain why it can be cathartic. But
And
that'll be
fun.
around the end. Yeah, and fun.
Yeah.
And of course, there's one. Music is also a good addition. There are plenty of horror video games out there whose soundtrack you can use that's perfectly atmospheric. You can even use like movie soundtracks. Just put on a Bluetooth speaker, put the speaker somewhere, and just let it play in the background. For example, I love to use the Insidious soundtrack. Oh my god, that's just, it has all these rising string notes that just make the players go and sometimes I try to time my own narration to the music so that it,
Oh yeah, that's so fun.
yeah, yeah, it is fun. It's excellent.
Like
But
coming
what,
from a stage background, that is quite fun.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I also recommend that there are some artists that specialize in creating music for horror settings. So you look them up on YouTube, and my God, just the stuff
Yeah,
you
lots
find.
of free. All so many free resources for music, for horror campaigns and general atmospheric stuff. And of course, it always helps the atmosphere if you put role play before gameplay. Now, this we normally don't preach how players should play, but it's very difficult to focus on the. It will be very difficult to enjoy a horror campaign the way it is meant to be enjoyed if you're there to rules lawyer to play a
Power game.
certain way. Power game, yeah, exactly.
I mean, nothing is going to ruin a suspenseful story like too much dice rolling. As much as we
Exactly.
love dice, just
Yeah,
this is not
I
going to be about the
literally have
dice
like
this time.
5 sets of dice within reach, and I would recommend that you roll less for a horror campaign.
And keep and this is another thing. You In a horror campaign, you keep the rolls for when it matters.
Yes.
Every like in a horror campaign, every die roll should feel like something terrible will happen if they don't succeed.
Oh yes, existential dread. We're actually going to talk about that in one of the next sections of in one of the later sections of this episode. So now we go to part 3, imagery. Uh, Now for imagery, I'd like to go for I'd like to talk about Stephen King's 3 levels of horror. Stephen King said that there were 3 levels of horror in literature and in movies, and it's number one. The first level is the gross out. That's your basically disgust, vomit, gore. I think also falls under this category. Body horror, violence. At its very lowest is a gross out. Next is your horror. Horror is underscored by learning about things that shouldn't be or being faced with the unknown or unfamiliar. This is where you get spiders the size of bears, or
Cthulhu.
yeah, Cthulhu, or the alien the alien from Alien chasing you, and yeah, just appearing out of nowhere, chest
Oh
bursters, stuff
man.
like that.
Oh,
And
we did
then
that once. Like, fuck. Oh, that's my f bomb for the.
yeah,
Anyway,
Titus
we
has
did
given up
this.
his one F bomb for the night. Luckily, YouTube doesn't count our putang ina bombs.
Yay, puta na. Anyway,
We can say it as much as we want.
oh god, I ran this with my friend Toby a couple of years back. It's the Alien horror RPG system. Oh man, the moment the Xenomorph came out, oh, like we didn't know whether or not to scream or cheer because we knew it was gonna happen, but we were dreading it because we knew that the moment it came out, at least one person was going to die. Two people died.
Yeah, anything in the alien genre, not everyone survives. Usually, just one person survives. In fact, and finally, the highest level of Stephen King's three levels of horror is terror. This is the realm where fear is caused by the imagination. This is the realm of the unknown and the uncertain. This is where your existential dread falls under. Basically, it's
This is
our
his
mind.
favorite, by the way.
This is my favorite because this involves getting your players' minds to play tricks on them, and it's amazing. It's just
Oh, the mind games, just yeah,
yes, exactly.
yeah.
Michael just said sometimes silence is the greatest terror. Yes, this is an excellent thing to do. Like, just imagine being in a quiet, dark room playing this game, playing a horror game, and it's just you turn off the music all of a sudden, and the players are making choices, and they might not even notice that the music's gone, but it also might give them this weird sense of dread, which is an actual system, by the way, dread.
Oh, we will talk about Dread.
Yeah, we will talk about dread perhaps in another episode. And then where our next part is the key advice for better imagery. Oh, exactly. Here. Sometimes what the players imagine is worse than what we. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah,
And that is why you never describe the stuff. You never describe the stuff too much. I mean,
yeah,
okay, we're going to say that being descriptive is a very, 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 very important part of a horror campaign, but
yep,
being too
it is.
descriptive can be bad too.
Yeah, but that goes into storytelling. Uh, if you're narrating current events, it's also good to be as detailed and descriptive as possible. And here's one piece of advice I know Titus loves is employ cinematic techniques.
Yeah, he knows this about me. Um I always have an imaginary camera following the party in a horror campaign. I describe what the camera is looking at. If I'm describing and this is something they teach you in grade school English as well. When you're describing something, you go the way your eyes would be going. If your eyes are going to look at the top first and then move down to the bottom, you describe it from top to bottom. Exactly the way a camera would pan down, or it goes from describing a landscape, describing somebody's reaction. Um,
Describing a scene.
and you have to know what to point the camera at. One of my favorite pieces of horror fiction is the Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. Damn, it's an old book. It's still really good. It holds up. I recommend it to anybody. The Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. When the thing finally comes out, the scary thing, the Dunwich horror itself, Lovecraft does not describe the monster. After everything, you got into the end, he doesn't describe the monster. He describes the reaction of the guy looking at it. And then you just imagine the worst thing in your own head. And
This reminds me of Cloverfield, that amazing horror film, the found footage horror film, yeah, sci-fi horror film Cloverfield. The entirety of the monster is never revealed. The camera is a limited perspective that just points to what the people can see, and you see the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty's head just rolling through the street. You see the monster's feet walking by. You never see a complete picture, and it just adds to to the value of the imagery. You just imagine the worst things imaginable.
I think
So
that's why,
yeah.
and when I say cinematic techniques, I mean everything that can be used in a movie. I mean swelling up music, changes in lighting. If your players are okay with it, jump scares.
Oh,
Uh,
I've literally done this during a campaign. We're gonna demonstrate what kind of jump scare I've done. Titus, count me down. Then suddenly, yeah, I've literally done that to a person, and it made them palpitate for a little bit.
oh god, uh, the best jump scare that I've ever experienced in a game was there was this silence. There was this silence after there was this really tense moment of roleplay and then silence. The DM did not speak. It was silent. The music just went silent. And then I jumped when the DM started laughing as one of the characters. It was the best jump scare I have ever experienced. I hate jump scares. I don't like it in movies. I love it in RPGs. I don't know why. Don't ask me to explain it.
I do have to remind everyone though that you have to, since still a campaign, you have to ask your players what they're okay with, including jump scares.
Some people
Like
aren't okay with jump scares.
some people aren't okay with jump scares. Some people have heart conditions that could be exacerbated by jump scares. Basta when in doubt,
Huwag mong subukan. Masisira ang buhay mo.
yeah.
It's the only time. It's one of the like. I think one of the good things about watching our stream is you actually get to see the president be right.
Mhm.
s-
Okay. Yeah. This ties back to our last piece of advice. Look back at the good horror movies of the day, of the past. Why were the images and scenes so scary? Like, is it because of what you didn't see on the screen? Is it because of what the screen wasn't revealing enough of, and so on?
like just remember your favorite scenes. Going back to Cloverfield, remember that time when oh my god. Remember the time when one of the characters gets dragged behind a white screen and you only see their shadows and then you
Oh
see
yeah,
their body bloat up and explode and you don't see any of it. It's all just silhouette and okay, I remember Cloverfield to be a meh movie, but the more I think about it, I realize it was a good movie.
yeah. It's an excellent look at the monster genre. Oh, I'd like to go back to to imagery. There was this one time. There was this one time. I was running a horror one shot, and my players were going through a town. And upon entry to the town, there were all these marble statues in various poses, and it's just people doing their everyday things. And as they got closer and closer to the town, the statues in caught in motion seemed to be moving away from the very thing they were heading to, until they heard this mournful noise from one of the statues going, a muffled screaming. And when they looked closer, the eyes were moving, looking at them, and they didn't know what to do. So they tried to break open the statue, and all it did was the organs slid out, organs and blood slid out from the cracks that they made, and the screaming stopped. Now that is an example of imagery. Yes. And it was, I think, an excellent exercise, one of my better scenes, because it highlights a few of the storytelling elements that we're going to talk about later on.
Oh
After we
God, I
talk
am going
about
to.
after we talk about creating a good story. Now,
Ah,
first we go to theme and genre. Titus, why don't you take this one?
well, theme and genre go hand in hand. So whenever you think of a story, remember that horror has several different themes and genres. You've got films, you've got cosmic horror, that's my personal favorite, psychological horror, uh, monster films, ghost films, um, sometimes, and slashers. Everybody
Slashers.
loves a good slasher. Usually theme and genre go hand in hand, but you have to understand what every genre actually means. For example, what are zombie films about? Zombie films usually tackle social horror. It talks about usually society. Cosmic horror usually talks about existential dread, the feeling of being small in the world, that helpless feeling that you are absolutely nothing in the face of the grand scheme of the cosmos. Psychological horror just um delves into your fear of not just no I mean, people think psychological horror is your fear of crazy people.
No, no,
It's
no.
not.
It's about the monsters inside. It's not usually well, psychological horror can overlap with other genres, like, for example, the Haunting of Hill House is a psychological horror and a ghost story at the same time.
Like
Uh, it is about the monsters inside more so than the monsters outside.
um fantasy horror is also a thing,
Yeah,
but there is a there are limitations to fantasy horror, but it can be done.
yeah.
I
Oh,
I recently played this game where we were we were all human beings that were, I mean, in this system you're all human beings that were escaped from being enslaved by the Fey folk, and basically the entire game was just about abuse. um you were dealing with the aftermath of being enslaved by these fairies for such a long time that you start acting like them, you start making the same decisions these fairies would be making, you start talking like them, and the GM was really just putting us into situations where we were forced to face the fact that we were turning into our abusers, and that was, it made me very uncomfortable, and that's what I loved about it. I love
yeah.
to be made uncomfortable in these sorts of games.
And we're going to talk about why this discomfort, this fear has value, but later on. So,
Yeah.
the next part of the story is setting. Now, setting has a few elements, of course. There's the when and the where. That's the most basic. This is just the elements of the world. That's the
And by the
easy
way,
part.
this is very, very important to talk about because um, this is all about immersion. People need to be in the moment. The thing is, if you see an anachronism, like an anachronism that's just too out there, or something, or a player just doesn't understand the setting, or when it's happening, it just kills the mood. Like, it's an immersion killer if somebody
Yeah,
doesn't understand the setting. So you
yeah,
need to get that ahead to your players.
yeah. Like for example, our advice is specifically for running a one shot, but it's more than possible to run a long campaign with multiple sessions that's still in the horror genre. But this is for one shots. For example, a good when and where is a creepy town. Just a creepy town. It's a common trope in the horror genre. The players will fill their imagination with all sorts of imagery about creepy towns, but it also still helps to describe it. What makes it quirky? What makes it strange? Is it like uh is it a too happy town, too perfect? Everything is bright and shiny, but something is simmering under the surface? Or is it desolate and isolated? Are the people living in squalor and poverty? Is it filthy? Does it smell a certain way? These are the questions you need to ask about your when and where. So there. And an important concern here is verisimilitude. The rules of the world.
Oh God, yes.
The rules of the world. Like the world has to make some sense. Even in the horror genre, it has to make some sense.
Like, and no, the rules will also dictate whether or not it's applicable for a horror genre. For example, I would not recommend, and I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I would not recommend Dungeons and Dragons for a horror setting
Yeah,
or a
it's
horror
more for
campaign.
a adventure campaign. It's still possible, completely possible to do a horror campaign in Dungeons and Dragons, but
You
it
know, it's just the rules of that world, especially the rules of the system, are designed in such a way that your characters are heroes. Horror stories are not about heroes. They're about people, normal people.
and where did it go? Oh, I
You
forgot
went
to.
ahead.
Oh, I went ahead. Well, all I meant to say was that as a game master, storyteller, whatever, you can bend the rules, but don't break them. Like if uh, you can bend the rules, but don't keep changing them just to move the
Make things
story
scary.
forward. Yeah, because otherwise it will break the fine line of helplessness that you need to uh, create. Dandy has an interesting comment on Dungeons and Dragons, favored to make you feel powerful, and that's absolutely right. It is favored to make you feel powerful, whereas horror campaigns thrive on helplessness.
Yeah. But at the same time, you can't make them too helpless.
Yeah, you
Um,
can't make them too helpless.
just
It's fine if it's a no-win choice. It's not always bad to have a no-win choice, but you have to make them think they can win at the very least. And
or
if
at
you change
least
the
make
rule,
them reasonably think that the characters think they can win. That's
yeah,
an
or
interesting one.
give them the incentive that despite a no-win choice, they still have to press forward. They have to have that incentive to drive forward.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
And hello, Mars. Give them agency. There you go. That's an
Yeah,
excellent. Yeah, give them
that's
agency.
very important. You can't just keep saying no to your characters. Um, like when your characters, you just don't say no.
Yeah.
Like, oh, can I reach that lead pipe so I can hit the killer? And you know that they're not supposed to fight back against the killer.
Players should never lose options, even if the characters seem to be or feel
Yes,
helpless. According to Toby, yes, I completely agree with this. Like even if none of their options are palatable, I feel like they should still in yeah, or have them deal with the fallout of their choice. This is always excellent. Consequences are an excellent element of the horror genre. Like
I wouldn't even say it's an element. I would say it is a necessity
yeah, it is a necessity.
because
We'll actually talk about these. Yeah,
everything that
everything that happens.
happens in a horror story should have weight.
Yeah, basically the stakes should be real, and we're actually going to talk about that in another section. So
That's why even in Call of Cthulhu, you have to take sanity damage just from killing another person. Whereas in another system, it's just, you killed another
yeah,
person. Good for you.
in Vampire the Masquerade, you take humanity damage if you go against your principles in any way. Like if, for example, you drink someone, that'll take you, that'll ebb away at your humanity. So next element of story is the plot. Now, the first element of plot is structure. It's always, this is a generally good structure to follow. You have your, this is the most common story structure there is in Western literature, and it is nice to think about it when you're trying to create a story for your one shot campaign. Always start with exposition, and then the rising action is where the more of the world is revealed, and more of their actions affect the world. And of course, the climax, the big boss fight, the big reveal, whatever
If
it
there
may be.
is a boss fight.
If there is a boss fight, if there, or just an event they must prevent, an event that they must ensure succeeds, whatever the case may be.
It's the
This is a,
moment that decides if the
yeah,
thing happens or not.
yes. And
By the way, DR uses that story structure. I actually structure a lot of my stories in horror campaigns after the hero's journey.
yeah,
A
that's also
very,
an interesting
very
one.
twisted version of the hero's journey.
The hero's downfall, ganun.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, another decision you have to make in the creation of your story is balancing the familiar versus the unfamiliar.
Because I keep saying, in a horror campaign that you need to you need to understand that people are afraid of things that they are familiar with. If somebody who has never heard of a wolf hears a wolf howling in the middle of the woods when it's dark, they're not going to get scared.
It may or may not. Another interesting here is, what do you is the type of story you present your characters with. Do you present them with completely unfamiliar circumstances? That's a good place to start. For example, the creepy town. They end up at the creepy town. That's a good example of starting with the unfamiliar. Or you could start in a setting they are familiar with, using tropes they are familiar with, and then slowly reveal what's unfamiliar about them. See, horror actually drives forward because of the fear of the unknown and the unfamiliar, and this is where it thrives. Like, for example, I was talking about like that Stepford Wives style town where everything is perfect, the flowers are perfect, the birds are singing, and then one night you hear strange noises and the fire in the distance, and apparently the town is a cult, and they sacrifice visitors. Yes, tropes everyone can relate. Tropes everyone can relate. Using tropes, which will be again described in another
We're going to
section.
talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a bit. This is an excellent way to balance the unfamiliar versus the familiar.
Um, it's also good to mix it around, like, you know, play with what they do know and what they don't know. There is a sweet spot in the middle between knowing and not knowing. And what's really fun is when the players have an idea. The players have an idea of what's going to happen because they've seen horror films or they're familiar with the genre, but their characters don't.
Yes,
And
exactly.
they can just play that out. We were playing the Alien um the Alien horror RPG with Toby, and we knew the Xenomorph was gonna come out and kill us. We knew at some point it was, but he just kept holding the thing back. Like right when we thought it was gonna come out, a door opens. It's not the Xenomorph. Uh, the camera starts to move, towards a dark part of the room, it's not the xenomorph. But we were all just anticipating for the thing to come out until it finally did, and it was glorious. People
Yeah,
lost
this is
limbs.
yeah, and this is where skepticism is excellent. Skepticism in face of the unknown. This is where the setting actually comes in also. Like the setting determines what the characters will be skeptical of, because if you present them with the rules of the world, that means anything that goes against the rules, that's what they'll be skeptical of. The characters, at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, conflict. Now, it's always important to think of a main conflict in your story. Like, for example, the zombie genre. It's on the surface level, it is humans versus zombies. But there are also sub conflicts, and that's why it's more of a social horror, which is why The Walking Dead has lasted how like 45 seasons? I don't know.
And
45
a
seasons
lot
of
of the time, you
filler?
don't. And a lot of the time, it's not the zombies that are threatening everybody.
Yeah, exactly. More often than not, the zombies are not the greatest threat in the story. It's other humans with their own interests, with their own selfish needs, with their inability to think of the greater good,
That
or
bad guy from
hiding what
Train to
they've done.
Busan,
Yeah,
I hated
exactly.
him more than the zombies.
Yeah, I hate. Yeah, exactly. You hated him more than the damn zombies, because he's an asshole. Order versus chaos. Yes, excellent. Yes, and psychological drama. Yeah, it's this. Oh well, these are the things you have to think about. And now we go to part 5: storytelling techniques
Oh
and
man, that's my
tools.
favorite.
Now, Titus brought this point up with me earlier.
Isolation is very, very important. You need to deprive the players of their senses. Almost every single one of my horror one shots, I never run a campaign. Um, oh yeah, that's a good one. Conflicts uh, versus self versus the environment and versus circumstance. When all these conflicts just marry each other, when they're all happening at the same time, that's horror. Actually,
Yes.
no, that's life, and life is horrible. Anyway, um, so isolation, you deprive them of their senses, uh, put them in situations where they can't hear, and there's a looming threat that they won't be able to sense. Put them in situations where they can't see. Put them in situations where they can't speak. Cut their phones off. Almost every single one of my horror one shots takes place in a setting where the characters have no access to technology. A lot of the time, I don't set stuff in modern days unless social media is going to be used some way. Because can you imagine how many horror movies would be solved if everyone just had phones?
Yeah, just call 911. It'll be
Just
easy.
call 911. Gerald's game. Gerald's game, and she has a phone. Just it's over. There's no story. Um, and the thing with isolation is don't just isolate them. Isolate them from each other. Bring the person who is Toby loves doing this. Get the guy who's good at lockpicking to not be around when people need to open a door. Get the
Yeah.
guy who's good at talking to not be around when they have to deal with the scary caretaker. Like the people that they need at that particular part, make sure they're not around. Just make them wish they had something. Just keep something that they need just out of reach when they're facing a threat. Just isolate them because that's something we're all scared of, right? Everyone's scared of being alone. That's
Oh,
yeah.
I forgot to animate this slide. Well, and anyway, the next important consideration is uncertainty. In particular, the stakes. Now, there's this constantly looming question: how do you demonstrate that the stakes are real? And I think a bad example of the stakes not be a good example of the stakes not being real is the final season of Game of Thrones. Like we all watched that episode where the Night King attacks Winterfell, the long night, which was literally just one night, and nobody of importance dies other than Theon Greyjoy and Jorah Friendzone,
Sure, friend zone.
and that's it.
Hashtag
Like
friend zone is a myth. Um, it's anyway. The and yeah, one of the things to make the stakes real is just embrace the reality of character deaths. Everyone should understand and know that their characters could die at any moment, even at the start of the game.
yes,
Just uh, and there are many ways. Put them close to death, danger. Make them feel like they're uh, put them in situations where they feel like, God, if I hadn't rolled that way, my character would have died for sure. And maybe if they do, hell, kill the character.
and yeah,
Um,
there's always a
and
way to
then
make death fun. Also, yeah,
making oh god, and that's why so many horror systems allow you kill the NPC they were supposed to protect.
this is
That
excellent. Yeah, this is
is
excellent.
really good. Okay, because of course, here's the thing. Uh, player death. Player death is sorry. Player character death. We don't kill players. Never kill your players. Kill the characters. Um, the character deaths. They already know that you're not gonna start killing them towards the end. Till towards the end, because when you start, they know that this person um is going to um you know that these people are meant to survive at least for a while so that they can play the game, right? So threaten the NPCs, kill the NPCs, get them to care about the NPCs, and then kill the NPCs. Sometimes players care more about the NPCs than the characters.
Yeah,
Oh, and
exactly.
making death fun. This is a really good example. Um, I have gone as far as killing people off towards the beginning of the campaign, and I did this in a certain way. In one game, I killed off a character because the character just had a really bad roll, something terrible happened, and of course, I can't betray the dice, because if I betray the dice and pretend that character has plot armor, I kill the stakes. So the character had to die, and what I did was I I let the character interact with the story as a ghost.
Yes, this is the
Yes,
beauty of a horror campaign. Even death of of a player character is it can be awesome if done the right way. Like
like
that's
that
the point of horror.
the bad guy in Train to Busan. Um, his death is so pathetic. He dies begging for his mother, but the actor playing him is having a blast because
Yeah.
he gets to do all these terrible things. Oh, this is actually one bit of advice I got from Toby. Well, you don't do this all the time, but it's a very satisfying way to kill characters. You kill them by order of morality. You kill the most like you really kill the bad the morally bad characters first. Bad guy monologues. Oh man. I always give the bad guys monologues before they get killed. That's fun. There was this one time in another campaign, um, the players started dying, I think, in the 30-minute mark, even if we were there for 4 hours. The players started because what happened was one of the characters wasn't aware that this entire supernatural thing that's happening was actually meant to be staged to scare her. Like the entire ordeal was her ex-husband gaslighting her into believing that she was in a horror scenario. So like there were elements of abuse and gaslighting and everything. And The people who died, I had them placed in a separate room where they would all be directing me on what to throw at this character that they were gaslighting into thinking that everyone was dying, until we got to this reveal where this character, who was kind of everybody's victim, where she is led to, I called it the Dogan because that's what Stephen King calls a control room, where she is led to this control room under the abandoned hotel where all the characters who were supposed to be dead were controlling everything in a very cabin in the woods sort of way. They were controlling the special effects. They were controlling the they were controlling all the horrible things that were happening, and just the player the player didn't know. The player didn't know that all of this was just um didn't know that her character was being gaslighted the entire time. So it just uh the character just flips, just goes insane. She draws her gun and she just starts gunning everyone down, and then like all the interpersonal conflicts come out, and it was gory, there was blood, they all killed each other. I didn't have to bring out a single ghost. Sorry. uh that was Calling the King, by the way, Toby. The cursed play. um
Okay, now we go to the mystery. Now, what is the difference from uncertainty? This is the concern of how much do you reveal over time, how much in the beginning and how much over time. It's always good to never reveal the full picture uh, immediately, because that rarely ever works unless you're hoping to subvert certain expectations.
um Also, when we say mystery, there has to be a difference between, well, okay, not a difference, but it's really fun to make a difference between what the players know and what the characters know.
Yes.
There is nothing wrong with showing the reflection of the threat in the mirror, and you tell the players that the characters can't see it. And then they have to roleplay
Yep.
it.
Yep.
GMing for this is such a blast. GMing horror campaigns is such a
Yeah.
blast.
It is. It's just it's because your players consent to suffer to a greater degree of suffering
Oh
than would
yes,
any other campaign. And
I
now there's
love
the
it. I love
the
it when people
concern.
consent to let me hurt them.
Harder dungeon master. Hashtag harder dungeon
Oh
master.
man, so excited.
Wait,
Show
let me just
versus
create
tell.
that banner. Hashtag harder dungeon master. There you go. And now there's the difference between showing and telling. Now there's nothing fine with telling. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's better. There's nothing fine. There's nothing wrong with showing either. But showing often forces the players to make their own conclusions about what they're presented. Telling them will telling them what's outright going on might be a little hmm, always might reveal too much in the beginning. That's why it's
Yeah.
always showing them a picture and asking them to look deeper into it rather than telling them what's in the picture.
And by the way, we don't mean just outright describing the threat. Sometimes you don't. We keep
Yeah.
using Cloverfield as the example. The people just running from an unseen thing, that is showing, and it's telling nothing.
Yes.
Oh, do we use minis for one-shot horror campaigns?
Oh, it's perfectly fine to use minis. I've used minis for a one-shot horror campaign. Uh, it also had a fog of war element, and at the time, I made this terrain out of cardboard that suddenly opened up and revealed stuff. I love doing that. It's there's a way to use minis for a horror one-shot horror campaign, especially I think this is especially useful if you're taking facing into account. If the character is facing this way, they can't see exactly behind them. That's an excellent way to use the element of surprise there.
I personally don't. Um I try to avoid using any visual aid when I do a horror campaign because I always feel like whatever the player is imagining is worse than anything that I could visualize for them.
That's also true.
But that's,
But
that
yeah, that,
different DMs have different styles.
yeah. I don't always use minis. Like I use minis only for facing. Like well, if you're facing this way, that means you have to look behind you to see what's behind you.
Or the Slender Man effect.
Yeah, the Slender Man effect is perfect for minis. And yeah, this is an important element: helplessness and futility. A good rule of thumb is to present problems that are barely within reach or out of reach of solving. Okay, you can use it for positioning. Yes, Michael.
That's
Yes,
also true.
this is an excellent. Yeah. Also, I'm sorry if we're replying to your comments late. It's because there's a 10-second delay between the video and the comment. You see it 10 seconds later, and yeah.
Also, sometimes I get super excited about what I'm talking about and I forget to look at the comments.
Yes. And don't forget to like and subscribe right up there. All the
Yes, please don't
details
forget to
on the
like and
top row.
subscribe.
Just don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, we go back to helplessness and futility. Yeah, this is a good rule of thumb. Present problems that are just barely within reach or barely out of reach.
Just
Uh,
don't put them in a situation where they know that it's impossible for them. Like,
yeah,
don't make it
or
impossible.
don't make it
It's not
impossible.
scary if it's impossible. There has to be the characters need to have hope that they can make it out, otherwise they won't try. And okay, I mean, we will talk about this more, but there is no horror without hope.
Yeah, there is no horror without hope.
Give them something to hold on to, give them something to hope for, and then snatch it from them.
Yeah. And here's an interesting one: incite paranoia. This was from Titus when we were talking about this earlier. But not too much that this exceeds their desire to proceed in the game. Like it's a common mistake for dungeon masters and game masters uh to make the odds so great, like to make them face traps in every direction too often, so much so they're afraid to take the next step in the game, and
But
that's also
that's why when you make them helpless, make them helpless to get something that's really, really, really important to them. Don't make sure that the characters actually value their lives or value something that's going to get threatened, or maybe even value the world that is at stake, because sometimes they're trying to save the world and they can fail. Yeah, feeling helpless is completely different from feeling everything is pointless.
yeah,
You don't want players to just accept their situation and not fight. No, you want the players to fight. You want the characters to fight back. Even if the players know that they're probably going to lose, you want the characters to fight back.
exactly,
You want them to move forward despite the paranoia. They know that, the other player characters around them could stab them in the back, and I've been killed by player characters before. I'm looking at you, Toby. You didn't tell me that one of them was a robot. One of them was a robot, and then he tore me apart. It was brutal. And just, being paranoid about everything, and despite that paranoia, like, just moving onward anyway, the desire to proceed has to be there from the beginning. The players have to want to win, even if they won't.
yeah. Now we go into the subject of tropes. Now this is a point. Oh, here's some more. Here are more great points. If winning feels impossible, then death at least should feel meaningful. Yes, yes, I agree with this. I mean, it doesn't. Sometimes the dice or whatever the system makes you fail. Sometimes it's not meaningful. But in the horror genre, a death to fight the greater horrors is still meaningful. Now we go to tropes. We recommend you use and embrace them. Tropes are an excellent way to to build a world out of the player's imagination. If they know this particular trope, they already have certain ideas about certain things. And tropes aren't inherently bad, which is why I really dislike the whole cinema sins way of critiquing a movie, or the shaming of films, calling them bad because they have tropes. Tropes aren't bad. They
Or like,
are
I don't
not.
like it when people don't like a film because they say it's tropey. Like,
Yeah,
the film uh Spectre, the James Bond film. It's like one of the tropiest films I've seen. Sometimes people don't like it just because it has Bond tropes in it. It's
that's
like, oh,
literally
the last two no, because the last two films were so, at least no, Casino Royale was super subverty. Like it did a lot of unexpected things, and then all of a sudden Spectre, they gave us gadgets, they gave us like the laughing Christoph Waltz villain with the I am going to leave you in this room and expect you to die while I'm not around kind of, thing. And people just thought it was eh. I disagree. That's fun. I love that.
that's classic Bond. And now we go to subversion of tropes. You have when you subvert a trope, you have to do it right. You just have to do it right. Like
Yeah. Game of Thrones.
here, the dislike for according to Toby, the dislike for tropes is a misguided view similar to the misguided distaste for cooperative metagaming, which is different from abusive slash unfair metagaming. I agree. This is perfectly yeah. This is my thoughts entirely
And it's not
on
just
this one.
that. The tropes kind of give your players an idea of what you want them to do. Like if there's a dark basement, someone's got to explore that basement.
Yeah,
Um when there's a couple, that when one of them dies, it has to be within reach of the other so that they can Oh my god. I love it when yeah, exactly.
tropes are powering are and informative. Yes, Toby. Yes.
Or like, when you have like a parent and a child, that at some point the parent is going to have to start promising to be better to that child and saying that I'll start going to your recitals. I'll be a better father to you when we get home. I swear I'm gonna be better. And he's not gonna make it. It's so fun. Misery is so fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fun for if it's fun for everybody, of course.
Yeah. Subversion for the sake of yeah. Here's an excellent point. Horror should always have some form of a Chekhov's gun. Now, for those who don't know what a Chekhov's gun is, Chekhov pointed out that in literature or in drama, whatever you present should have meaning. That's how calculated it should be. Like, for example, if you show them a gun in the beginning of the story, it has to be fired by the end of the story. That is the concept of Chekhov's gun.
For example, if somebody sees a creature looming in the woods before the story ends, we need to find out what that creature is.
Or, in the case of Twilight, we need to bang that creature.
Well, in a horror campaign, oh boy, we have this character in a current campaign that we're doing, like who who basically has to have sex with demons to do like magic and stuff. Um, it's fun.
Okay, an incredible insight from Toby again. Players' backstories are naturally full of Chekhov's guns you can use, but you do have to ask if they are okay with it, and that's
Oh,
an excellent point. Yeah,
and I
this is
think
why
that's
I
why.
love Vampire the Masquerade as a system, because it literally has a list of people a character has that they're attached to as part of character creation, and these are people you can kill, mess with, make them suffer to make the players suffer.
Oh yeah, and like in another World of Darkness game, Wraith, where all your characters are basically dead. You're all ghosts. You have this list of fetters that were of some importance to these ghosts in in their living in their time when they were alive. Oh my gosh, like Toby loves to threaten the fetters, because if all the fetters are destroyed, the ghost has no reason to stay, and it just you don't know where they go. You don't know what comes after death,
Yeah.
after death.
An interesting
Just
thing here: subvert tropes with skill. What we mean by that? Subversion of a trope for subversion's sake is pointless. Case in point: Game of Thrones season 8 yet again. There's not enough in blood in my body to explain my frustration of how that
thank you, Game of Thrones, for giving us examples of how not to tell stories.
yeah, how not to subvert the expectations. Just because people expect things to happen a certain way doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You don't have to make a twist at every turn.
Oh, interesting thing about twists. The twist in a story should not make things more confusing.
Hmm.
A twist should make things clearer,
Yes.
but still
This.
unexpected.
Yes.
And players should never have to ask why.
Yeah. Actually, let's go back a little bit. This reminds me of the campaign I played with you, the one where I revealed that the long search for my character's father wasn't actually a search to reconnect, but a long, boiling search for vengeance. And the moment the character was reawakened, it was the father was just stabbed to death relentlessly. And I think that's a good that is a good example of a twist. If I'm not tooting my own horn.
Oh yeah, it is a good example of a twist. And what happened is he foreshadowed the twist. Like after he did that, all the strange things that his character was doing suddenly made sense. So it didn't raise questions, it answered them
No.
with
Okay.
skill.
Now we go to part 6, characters and the players behind. This is the final part of this. This is mostly for people who want to play in horror campaigns, and the advice game masters may have for you. Okay, Toby has another point. Great twists are things players go, ooh, that makes sense now looking back. Yeah, that's
Yeah, like when you look back, say, "Oh, that's why." Oh, okay. I keep talking about this.
bad twists are trying
Oh
to
man.
WTF the audience, which is like later M Night movies. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Although twists are not just limited to that. One of the greatest twists in movie history had no explanation. Um, Darth Vader being Luke's father came out of nowhere. Nobody was never foreshadowed. There was no, it was shocking, sure, but like again, there are exceptions to the rule.
It was a good, yeah. It's one exception, and Event Horizon. I actually have not seen Event
I
Horizon.
have not seen
I
Event
should.
Horizon.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Event Horizon, Michael?
Unless, of course, you want us to watch the film and experience the twist for ourselves.
Hmm. And mind you,
Ha! That is interesting. Okay, that is a very interesting thing because um, one, it depends on the system because some systems require the DM to not know, and for the DM to create the twist based on the players. There is this scenario in a game called Dread where um, these teenagers are stuck in this cabin in the woods, and they're stuck in this cabin in the woods, and they start dying one by one. And one of them is the killer. Here's the thing, though: each character is each character is given enough reason to think that they themselves were the killer due to some mental illness they have, or some kind of blacking out thing that they have. So in this case, when I run that, um, I don't know who the killer is going to be. But as the story moves forward, as players start revealing themselves, and until the inevitable point where one of the players realizes, wait a minute, looking at all the clues, am I the killer? And the player starts playing that out as if they were the killer. And you notice this person starting to actively act like the killer. Eventually, you have a meeting of the minds with that person, and you're like, okay, you got it. You're the killer. That's when you and that player start building up to a scene where it's revealed that it's them, which is great because none of the players really know if I contacted any of them and asked them to be the killer. In reality, I didn't. So even to me, it's a surprise.
I
Have
want
we
to
done
see
that?
a campaign where all the players are the actual killer monsters.
Oh, wait. There was one time. There was one time when all my players, Toby ran this too. Um, with me. I ran it with some of my other friends. There was this one time when all the players were Nazis digging for stuff for the Thule Society underground, and they were exploiting these African laborers to get there. The players just embraced their role as these terrible, terrible, terrible people, to the point that when they died at the end, we were happy that they died. Anyway,
This reminds me of this episode of this short run series, anthology series that went on TV. It was the first episode was a zombie episode, and it featured this. The main character was a female, was a girl who kept running away from her boyfriend who had turned into a zombie, who kept like following her everywhere. And she would encounter these characters as time went on. And then finally, at the end of it, it revealed that she was a zombie too the whole time. It was just her perception lying to her. The other characters she encountered over the course of the story, her memory came crashing back. She murdered all of them and ate them. And finally, she joined her zombie boyfriend, Cory Monteith, and they just ate people together in this romantic but sickening sort of twist.
oh, I want to highlight the first comment from Toby after that.
Which one? Curse of the Yellow Sign?
Yeah, yeah. The play and the Nazis. That's from a book called Curse of the Yellow Sign by a guy named John Wick. No relation to the Keanu Reeves character. It's I am running Volume 3 very, very, very soon.
Okay, now we go to part 6 for real now. Characters and the players behind them. Basically, this is a guide on how to enjoy horror games more as a player. Now, the first rule we have to say is be on board and present in the story.
Yeah.
Basically, allow yourself to enjoy horror. The thing about this is a point we brought up in the last Dungeons and Dragons episode of Dragonforge After Dark. You have to be in a specific mindset. A horror campaign isn't like a movie. It isn't like theater. It's the horror is not presented to you from a source beyond, going into you, going into your eyeballs and your ears, where your mind processes it. A horror campaign is rooted in the imagination
It's coming
that
from
we
you.
yeah, it's coming from you. It has to come from you, and you have to be willing to imagine, willing to be afraid, and all the emotions that come with horror to truly enjoy a horror campaign. If you go into a horror campaign and your mindset is not to get scared and to treat the game as some sort of thing you have to beat,
It's no point.
there's no point. It's not going to be enjoyable for you. You're just going to see
The table.
numbers and dice. Yeah, the table. That's it.
You just see a
And
table. You see your friends. Here's your DM, and that's not scary.
yeah,
But if you put yourself in the shoes of your character, regardless of who your character is, bad person, good person, different from you, similar to you, um, when we did the when we did digging for a dead god, when my players were putting themselves in the shoes of the Nazi soldiers, I mean, none of them are actual Nazis, as far as I'm aware. Um, but they feared things that Nazis would fear. They feared, this loss of power that a Nazi would feel. They, uh, I wouldn't go far as saying it, but they sympathized to an extent with their characters. Um, they all had these little traits that made them very un-Nazi, and were scared that the others would find out. One was gay, the other was uh, too much of a German patriot. Another was, I think, not even a Nazi; it was actually a British spy. So, um, you know, uh, the players have to internalize that fear, and that
yes,
is actually a conscious decision. It's not something the DM makes you do.
yeah. I mean, the DM can't. The DM can certainly put on a clown mask and scare the shit out of you by going out of a corner, but that's too much work on the DM's part.
Not saying that we won't do
It's
that.
not. Yeah, not saying that I won't do that, but you have to meet me halfway here, basically. And you have to remember the collaborative nature of tabletop RPGs. It's not you versus. It's not the players versus the game master. It's everyone together trying to create a good horror story, a good horror experience where you get scared shitless, where you feel the anxiety, the helplessness, all of that. And here's another good rule, and I'll have Titus take this over.
Yeah, be vocal and descriptive about your character's feelings. Tell, for me as the DM, I want to hear what about this is scaring you. Is it the mirror on the side? Is it a certain part of the monster that is grossing you out? I want to know so that I can give you more of it. One person who does this really well is Toby. Toby's right here. um, uh, like Toby's right here. One way that Toby does this is if Toby notices that that my character is being made uncomfortable by something, he puts more of it in. When we were doing Changeling the Lost, the one where our characters were survived being kidnapped and enslaved by fairies. Um, there was the scene where this other character was basically gaslighting my character into thinking that this traumatic thing did not happen to him, that these fairies are actually a myth and it was just something that he imagined. And Toby, expert DM that he is, noticed that I was getting really, really, really unsettled uh, by being gaslit into thinking that my trauma was invalid or that it didn't happen. And I felt for my character so much that I started describing my character's hairs standing up, his hands starting to shake, tears running down his eyes. And Toby um just upped the gaslighting to 11 and just said all the trigger words. Just, this is all your fault for getting so emotional about these things. You just don't know when things are all in your head, or like, this is really just blaming him, starting to blame him for all these terrible things that are traumatizing him, and it just drove my character insane. And by the end of it, my character was covered in blood because he killed another person in a frenzy in his insanity. Yes, yeah, yeah. Just so you know, um, every time he would always ask me if I was okay, and I would always respond with, "Yes, I'm okay," but my character isn't. My character definitely isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good. Yeah. Definitely
yeah,
check in with your players. And I got this comment from Miss Karaos on YouTube. That clown laugh, though, why was that so accurate? I actually practice my clown laughs. I can do every Joker's clown laugh, like Jared Leto. Ah, ah.
the seagull.
Yeah, but I thought that was excellent actually.
I
And
enjoyed him in
there's
Justice League.
yeah, yeah, and the Heath Ledger. That one, yeah. Always
Maybe
good
Jack
to
Nicholson.
have like a repertoire of sound effects at your command, like the scary noises.
I
Just the
have soundboards. I prefer soundboards.
yeah.
Do Mark Hamill.
Ooh, this is challenging. I don't think I can do Mark Hamill's laugh right now because my throat is a little tired because his is very throaty and raspy. But I promise I will attempt to do this in the next episode.
Okay, we need to write that down. The next
Yeah,
episode, he will do Mark Hamill.
I will do
You
Mark
heard it here,
Hamill's laugh.
folks. DR will do Mark Hamill
Yeah,
with his consent.
I will do Mark Hamill. I will do him to the best of my ability. I hope it satisfies.
Anyway,
Next, the next few steps of enjoying horror games. It's okay to want to beat the game or power game in any other genre, but horror, not usually the game to do it. Really isn't. Like,
yeah, please don't. A lot of you are probably um, a lot of you are probably familiar with the story of Old Man Jenkins. Um, it's a story of, there was this DM who, he was just so rule. There was this DM who was really rule centric, didn't care so much about roleplay, and did not read his characters' backstories and anything. Um, and he was running Call of Cthulhu. He was running Call of Cthulhu, one of the most RP intensive games, and he didn't care too much about RP. This guy made a power gamey character called Old Man Jenkins with this backstory that basically justified a lot of the impossible things that he could do in the game. What happened was this guy managed to gather up enough resources to kill Hastur, the king in yellow. Kill the king in yellow. You're not supposed to kill an elder god as a human being. But because the rules of the game allowed it, and he just played the rules, and the DM, just not understanding the point of Call of Cthulhu, just allowed it to happen somehow. The game ended with the party having
that's
killed
not yeah, it's not a horror
the king in
campaign.
yellow.
That didn't become a horror campaign. That became a power fantasy.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we kill gods in games all the time. Look at Final Fantasy. But horror games is not where you do that.
Yeah. Okay, now this is something that applies to all games, not just horror games, but the silent type is a common trope in the horror game. You have to play the silent type
The
carefully. You
silent
can't
kid.
just say you're sitting there absorbing information like you're always do. Like you're always doing. You you have to participate, and one way you can do this is to be more active. Silent types,
Describe. Describe what
yeah,
your character is thinking and feeling.
and possibly doing or want to do. We'll go back to an example where I played with Titus before when he was my game master for Scup. I played in that campaign. There could be entire sessions where I would say what 1 to 3 sentences entirely, but I would be passing Titus notes, texting Titus the whole time.
The whole time, for the entire 3 hour session, he was just texting me, and none of the players knew it. I mean, they were probably thinking, "Oh, uh, Danger must have had a really long day. He's not playing with us. His character is just he's never in the scene. He's always in the background. Whenever he is in the scene, he doesn't talk to anyone. Maybe we should just leave him be."
Yeah, Dandy was with us in that campaign. It's like I was.
And we just thought that, they just thought he wasn't just in the mood to play. It turns out he was, texting me the entire time, and everything that was happening, inside his silent character's mind was happening in secret until the final 30 minutes of the game, where he just unleashes hell on the world, assassinates the king, and plunges the kingdom into absolute anarchy. And he was doing this while all of the players were. And here's the thing: his actions that he was telling me, like he was texting me, that was actually that those were the explanation of several things that were happening to the players. They didn't realize that it was actually Danger's character that was causing them to happen. Turns out that he was the mastermind behind that entire episode, and the other players didn't know. And he was doing it as a silent type. Silent does not mean boring. Don't be
Yeah,
boring.
yeah. Just you can play a silent type if you want, but don't be boring. And yeah, you have to focus on action and employ what tools you need to pass notes, send texts if you
Text
don't
me.
want the other
Just
players to know. Yeah.
just
Well, well,
freaking text me. Like, I love it when my players text me with their character secrets, because it gets me in on the plot, and I love scheming with other characters, especially if they're scheming against each other, because that way I can make something bad happen. Uh, Making bad things happen is something I love to do.
and it's an essential part of horror.
And my players love it. They love it when I do bad things to them
And I think this is the final
with
tip.
consent.
And yeah, this
Consent
is
is
the
important.
We're going to talk about the catharsis in horror. The players have to accept the inevitability of death and potentially insurmountable odds. And that is one of the points of horror, to face such odds and to fight, no matter how futile, no matter how unknowable, no matter how helpless they might be in the face of adverse circumstances. That is the catharsis in horror, the capacity to go through all the fear and anxiety and all all the negative emotions that we try not to feel on a daily basis, just try and succeed, just trying your best. And that
It's
is cathartic. That's
it's
how you
really just
cathart.
cathart. It's really just this, oh man, this one game I'm playing. It's a campaign I have with Toby. I have this character. He's a father. He's a father who separated from his daughter because he was killed mysteriously, and he's trying to solve his own murder. And the thing is, while he does this investigation, is um he finds out that his daughter is actually in danger in the living world. And just those odds, just that connection, and just that emotion of love that my character feels, um he has traveled multiple times through literal hell, like fought his way past monsters through manifestations of his worst fears. And note, he's dead, okay? When I say hell, I mean literal hell, just to get back to his daughter and save her from whatever is threatening her. And that's exactly what horror should be about. Yeah, Toby's having flashbacks too. Um, yeah, yeah. Wraith Oblivion and Orpheus. Both are World of Darkness systems, by the way.
Yeah, World of Darkness, excellent systems. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's about fear versus the judgment that something is more important than fear. And I can't believe I'm quoting the Princess Diaries as we conclude our presentation. But we're going to have like a short discussion, like from the comments. What comments do you have? Tips, questions? We're taking them, except that request to attempt to do the Mark Hamill laugh
Yeah, sorry,
because
Mark
my,
Hamill
my
isn't here
throat is a
tonight.
little tired. So yeah, do you guys have any questions? Violent reactions,
I love violent reactions.
anecdotes from your own horror campaigns, tropes you've always wanted to explore but didn't know how to.
Stuff you want me to run for you? Oh man.
Speaking of horror campaigns, the Dragonforge actually ran a horror campaign. Yes, Dandy was part of it. Uh, it was a Vampire the Masquerade campaign you can find on YouTube. Okay. Any games you feel are impossible to run with horror themes successfully? Oh,
Dungeons and Dragons.
well, not impossible. Not
I
impossible, I'd
wouldn't
say.
do it. I
Okay,
mean,
you wouldn't do it.
well, okay, nothing is impossible, but I wouldn't do it.
Hmm.
He's done it. He's tried. He's tried. He's tried scaring me in Dungeons and Dragons, and the only reason that it worked is because my friends and I are uh, really into role playing. So of course we got to role play our characters being scared, even if we knew that we could wipe the floor with anything he threw at us. That's a lie. DR's a sadist.
I actually, there's not a thing I can imagine that is impossible to run with horror themes. This one, I don't know the lore well enough, but I feel
I
like it's still possible if it's
I
zoomed in.
Yeah, it has to be super zoomed in.
Yeah,
Um, I don't
it
think your
won't feel like a
character.
war. Yeah, it won't feel like a war game anymore.
Yeah, I don't think your characters can be um like um what did they call Sigmar's Space Marines again? Stormcast Eternals.
Yeah. How would you deal with a game group, say, ready to play vampire, but a person states blood as a do not have in the game? Okay, first question: why is that player playing vampire?
But I never say no. Let's
Yeah.
say that did happen, because there was a time when we were playing the Between with DR and a few of my friends. Somebody was not comfortable with sexual violence. It was a line. It wasn't a veil. It was a line. We could not have sexual violence in the game, and I basically told the players outright that okay, Jack the Ripper only kills people. I am willing to go as far as to say that Jack the Ripper doesn't do anything else but kill. Of course, the player said they it didn't seem right, and maybe they were willing to bend it a bit. But um, for the blood, be creative.
Yeah.
The players are always more important than the game that
Excuse
they
me.
are playing. I would find a way. Don't call
Yeah,
it
I agree.
blood. Um, make it feel like the essence or life force of the other person is flowing into you from that bite. You can
Use
describe blood.
euphemisms.
Use
Drain.
euphemisms. That's also a way that we deal with when a player doesn't want sex, but sex is gonna be part of the story.
Yeah.
We use euphemisms. We can make it stylistic. I like the scene in Suicide Squad where Harley Quinn kills a bunch of people and it's just confetti. It's great.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent one.
That is there's no blood in that. I mean, but we saw the violence. We knew what was happening to these people that was absolutely mutilating. Um, Gorn has a setting where everyone's a piñata.
I would actually go so far as to ask the player, uh, do they not want depictions of blood entirely, or is it just the word blood? Just to see uh, how much you can actually use when you're telling the story later on. Like for example, if they just don't like the word blood, then that's fairly easy enough. But if they don't want blood to be depicted at all, no mentions or allusions to it, now that's a bit of a challenge. And I
But
might,
it's
yeah,
not like I'd never say no. I would never say no. Oh, but okay. I'd say no sometimes to
yeah,
things that I
I'd say
really, really,
no.
really, really can't
I'd,
do.
I'd ask the player what they're doing in a game about vampires first and
Yeah.
foremost, because that doesn't make sense.
Um, I would ask them if they would like to play another game. Actually,
Yeah, I might recommend another game. Uh, yeah, that's about it. You just have to know the rules, like determine the extent of the trigger so that you can get around it. Are there any specific horror movies you personally hope to try playing as a game someday? Oh, hmm,
I'm actually I'm running a campaign. Um, I'm running a campaign currently with another group of friends that I have. It includes my siblings and a couple of our cousins. Um, we are running a campaign based on the John Wick Yellow Sign trilogy. We ran Digging for a Dead God. We ran, um, the Calling the King, the Cursed Play, and everything. And when I run a horror campaign, yes, everyone. When I run a horror games, usually everyone is dead by the end of the session. But the characters that come out in the next one are usually like echoes. They're usually echoes between them and the other uh players, the other characters that died before. I really, really, really want to run Act Three, which is the the flight of the Archimedes. It takes place in space, and a lot of that is based on uh 2001: Space Odyssey. I want to set my players up against an AI. I want doors to close on them. I want equipment to malfunction. I want them to feel like they are at the mercy of technology and just this absolute helplessness because you've been so dependent on technology. What are you gonna do when it turns against you? That is a fantasy that I play in my head over and over someday. The
me,
pandemic hit, we weren't able to run it, but
yeah,
we will.
I would love to run an alien style sci-fi horror one day. Yeah, that's definitely, I think, an excellent uh, movie to explore in terms of turning into a campaign. And there was also this show called The River. Unfortunately, it was canceled after one season. It only had 6 episodes. It was about a group of people. exploring the Amazon, looking for a missing this branch of the Amazon River that is avoided by the native peoples, be- because of all the inexplicable things that happen in that branch of the river. And they're basically, the point of the story was they're looking for a specific person. And I don't want to spoil what happens at the end of the season, but since nobody's really watching it, uh basically their goal at the end of the first season is to escape the river
Love you,
and
Toby.
all the things that happen on it. What
Um.
other?
Oh God, the thing.
The
I
thing.
really,
The
really
thing.
want to play the thing as a game of dread.
Yeah, I feel like it's an ex. It feels like the werewolf system. The werewolf game almost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Who's the
I need to
werewolf?
find. I really the reason I haven't done it yet because I need to find a way that um the thing can manifest the other players and
Yeah,
the players wouldn't know it. But then again, how is the player supposed to role play being
the thing.
copied
Yeah,
by the thing? Like there's like I'm there are a lot of logistical issues that I'm trying to figure out, but I will play the thing as a game of dread at some point in my life. uh
the thing equals
you
werewolf
you
equals.
have to teach me, you have to teach me how to do it.
Well, this is something we can talk about in our horror RPGs episode. So yeah,
I learned a lot of horror gaming techniques from Toby. He's he's like he's my he's my horror game guru.
yep. I mean, and does anybody else have any anecdotes, questions? Uh,
You and
I
I
mean,
haven't played a lot of horror games together, sadly.
yeah, I would like. I want to explore more. Perhaps after my GM strike. Yeah, that's the news. I'm on GM strike. I am avoiding being a GM for now, just so I can play for once.
Yeah, I'm running for him now. He is enjoying himself though.
Yes, I am enjoying myself. Anyway, before we there's one final question. Let's most memorable unintentional horror moment in a non-horror game.
You already know what I'm gonna talk about, Toby. You first, DR.
Ah, Titus ran this Pathfinder campaign for us a while back,
Oh fuck.
where this was the same second F bomb, Titus. Damn.
Putang na. Sorry. No, sorry.
Anyway,
That was great.
yeah. This was the same campaign where I revealed that the my character, who had been seeking his father for so long, wasn't actually seeking to reunite, but was seeking to avenge his colonized people who almost died out because the colonizers had brought disease and slavery and violence upon his people. And yeah, and the father, who was killed in such anger, returned as a ghost, and my character had to make a choice because the ghost possessed his beloved velociraptor pet slash companion, his last companion from the home to which he could never return. And the character made the choice to end his own life to save his companion. And it was just, yeah, it was just this meaningful, incredibly beautiful death. And I appreciated that so much.
I didn't know he was gonna do it. I didn't think. I thought that what I was doing is I was goading him into killing his pet, which is something I like to do to him. I was goading him into because he loved that Velociraptor. Like
Yeah.
it was his favorite NPC. It was always around. It always saved him. It always like really like it was part of the party and everything.
Yeah.
And what I was doing is I wanted to push his character into a corner where his character would have to kill his beloved pet, the one, the Velociraptor, and his character just loved that animal so much that um instead he stabs himself in the heart and he unfetters the ghost from the world by removing himself from it, which was just the most brilliant way to deal with a ghost. Of course the ghost disappeared and the Velociraptor was people were crying.
Yeah.
People were people were crying
Yeah,
when
I
it
remember
happened.
my final lines. I go home. I go home to mama.
Oh my god, people were crying. Like we had to take a break because people were crying. Nothing wrong with crying.
Yeah,
Um
nothing wrong. It's yeah, that means you're doing. It's a good campaign.
but,
The role
you
play
know,
is excellent.
crying, screaming, laughing, they're all reactions to emotion, and emotions is something you welcome in this sort of thing. You play horror to feel emotion. Makes you feel alive. Just um that's what I always tell my players. You see this, I always encourage them to put themselves in this place of these characters where they have to face these unsurmountable odds for the sake of something that they think is more important than themselves, just to face their fears. My favorite horror game is Bloodborne, simply because it's it's a scary game, but the way it's played is you have to rush towards the scary thing in order to kill it. You have to rush towards it. It hits you, you have to hit back immediately, and it actually regains your health. It's a beautiful horror game, and I keep telling them that horror is just a simulation of how we see our own lives, because you're faced with the feeling of helplessness every day. You're
Yeah,
faced with fear every day, and it's really just the decision to make it out to the bitter end that makes you a good character, that makes you a fighter. And in the end, even when your character is dead, you, the player, are still alive. You carry that with you. I have not played any of the Fatal Frame series. I'm so
I
sorry.
have
It's
not
way
played the
too
Fatal
intense for
Frame
me. I
series. Yeah,
I can't. I just can't. Um
I heard rumors of a new one coming out, but we haven't actually played it. And
right.
I
My favorite memorable unintentional horror moment in a non-horror game. Um Oddly enough, this was oh my god. My favorite unintentional horror moment in a non-horror game. We were playing it was a Cold War. It was the Cold War, and um it was the Cold War, and I was Russian, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the climax, when they were burning down this building, it was an act of terrorism. You know the the communist faction was fighting, was striking against um the the capitalist faction, basically, and they were bringing this building down, and my character was actually trying to save it until this one character uh recites these trigger words to my character, and then my character, and this was already me and Toby like collaborating what he did next, immediately moves on his own, turns into a completely different person, and starts to blow the building up. He was a sleeper agent this whole time, but the way it was played, it just had so much dreadful existential. That had such a dreadful existential tone to it that it was unsettling. I loved it. It was great. Uh, I love to feel uncomfortable in role playing games. Dark Souls 3, yes, Cold Shadows. That was it. Dark Souls 3 gives the players a tough choice ending. I would. The thing with Dark Souls 3. Yes, it does. Dark Souls 3 is an existentialist horror plot where, in the end, you choose to continue the cycle, this vicious cycle of light and dark that's it's a terrible world to live in, or to end it and to just allow the nothingness to happen and just hope that something comes out of that. um Again, it's dealing with futility, it's dealing with the meaninglessness in
Helplessness.
your life
Yeah.
and helplessness.
Helplessness.
But while your character is going through that, you, the player, also get this catharsis out of,
Yeah. Exactly.
you
Out
know,
of
so what if it's cyclical? So what if it's futile? I fought
yeah. You fought the good
I
fight.
you know, I fought the dragon. I defeated the soul of cinders. I took on these things. I fought, and that's what matters. That's
Yeah.
Dark Souls. Love Dark
And
Souls.
that's horror campaigns too.
I literally have the Dark Souls logo like stenciled on to my computer. Just that is how much I love that series, because it just, the feeling of helplessness that you feel, and the only way to get out of it is to fight and even to die trying. That is exactly the point of these things. I'm very passionate about this. Just just. So sorry. I'm very passionate about this sort of thing.
Anyway, that'll be the. I think we can conclude here. Before we do that, though, please remember to like and subscribe.
Please
It
like and
helps
subscribe.
us. And please check out dragonforgehobbies.com for all your gaming goods. We have
We can sell you stuff.
dice. Yeah, we can sell you stuff
Give us
all
money.
day. Give us money for the
We're
dice, for
capitalists.
the books. Capitalists, a small business having a difficult times in the pandemic. That's what we are. And thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you, Toby, Michael, Veronica, everyone who's here, Dandy. Thank you all for participating.
Ah! DR,
We
take
hope
him on that offer.
Ooh, and would be happy to. Oh, yes, please. Oh my Lord, have mercy. I would love
I
to play.
I don't stop talking about him, by the way. Like, he knows you. He practically knows you at this point.
And again, thank you. This has been Danger, and
Titus,
say
you
your
know.
name.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to introduce me yourself.
Okay. And this has been Danger and Titus with Dragonforge After Dark, episode 11, running horror campaigns.
I'm so excited for our next episode.
Yep.
I have so much to talk about. Happy Halloween.